Okay. Achim, it's not in presenter mode, but...
Okay, yeah, I'll do that in a minute. I stopped it by now too. I want to see who's coming in.
I started the recording, so maybe we can start.
Okay.
And if you can share the slides. Maybe I start already. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, which is organized to you by the Greenet network, which is the NCP project for Cluster 5 NCPs. My name is Sanna Alaranta, and I'm the task leader for trainings in the Greenet project, and I'm also the Luxembourgish NCP for Cluster 5. And today our topic is, this is a webinar targeted to, especially to new Cluster 5 NCPs. And as you know, we had the first webinar for new NCPs 2 weeks ago, where we focused more on basics of Horizon Europe, the background, the history, the policy background, and the main concepts. And today we look more at the day-to-day work of an NCP, and I will go through the structure of the webinar a bit later on. If you can change the slide, please. So some practicalities before we go into the agenda. So you should be automatically muted and your camera is off. For any questions, please use the chat. If it's a question that is really clarifying something, we take it right away. But if it's more for a discussion, longer discussion, we will take it after the presentations. And if you have any other issue, use the chat and I will try to help you. And then the slides and the recording, so this webinar is recorded, will be shared to Cluster 5 NCPs in our repository on the website. Then if you can change the slide, please. So this is the structure of today's webinar. So we will go through different, so the NCP role, who are the different clients, what should be avoided, and then some NCP services and best practice in different countries from UK, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. And now, without further delay, I'm really happy to have, thank you so much, Conall and Achim, who are task supporters in this trainings task. And I think the whole idea came from Achim to do this Newcomer NCP, who have taken the role today of trainers to give you this training. And I would like to give the floor, and you can introduce yourself a bit better, but I would like to give the floor to Achim. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for introducing and organizing everything, Sanna. Unfortunately, I cannot see who is here digitally, but I saw there were almost 30 persons who registered. So I suppose it's a bigger club who's listening. First, to say some words on me. My name is Achim Eberspächer. I'm one of the national contact points on Cluster 5 in the Netherlands, working for the Rijksdienstbeoefening Nederland, RVO. I'm doing that since September 2019. So I'm between 3.5 and 4 years that I'm doing that. Before I worked in Germany, in Berlin, for the project Energiesystem der Zukunft. That's an advisory body to the German federal government on energy transition issues. Earlier, I did a PhD on the history of futurology, and I graduated at the universities of Nancy 2 in France and the University of Stuttgart in Germany, in history, on language and literature studies. So at the beginning, I didn't do anything with energy, climate, and mobility issues. So, what's the goal of this webinar today? In the 3.5 years I'm doing that job, I was mentoring some newer colleagues, and I always wanted to put down what I'm telling there on some slides and tell it rather from the practice than from documents. And so you are a kind of a diverse group. If I look at the registrations, we have, for example, Frankie from Malta. You just started. A warm welcome to you. I think for you, almost everything will be useful. But we also have registrations of persons who will already know a lot. And I hope for them it will be useful to see how the day-to-day work happens in other countries, having examples, and yeah, see how you can do it in another way. Okay, first part, the roles or the functions of a national contact point. It's in most cases, if I have a discussion with a client, the first question is, do you know what a national contact point horizon is or does? And most of the persons know it's a person who advises a bit, but that's a bit all. So I have a story always to tell what we are doing, what our functions are, but they differ from countries. And the allocations of national contact points determines their roles. There are some additional roles. So if we look at the options for the distribution of tasks, we look at the best at the program committee and the delegations there. And there we always have delegates and we have experts. And in option or scenario 1, the NCPs are identical with the delegates. They are makers of national policies themselves. And in that case, they work for a public body, normally a ministry. So for example, in Denmark, that's the case. Number 2 is the national contact points are part of the national delegation. Then in most cases, not as delegates, but as experts. And they are located at a public body or a half public body other than a ministry. That's the case in the Netherlands. I know that's the case in Germany too, also in Austria. And number 3 is the national contact points are no part of the national delegation, and they are located elsewhere than the delegates, for example, in Italy. And in Italy, we have also the situation that delegates there are scientists from universities, and the national contact points, they are located at Apre in Rome. That's kind of a public body, while the delegates are from universities. So what's the influence on the roles? In cases 1 or 2, where the national contact points are involved in the delegation, they have to do with all this program committee business, program committee issues. And the by far most important part of it is creating and co-creating the work program. I put here, or I picked this this figure from Thomas Schubert. I think most of you know it. That's how the recent Cluster 5 work program began and developed until adoption. So you see it took about 1 year, several consultations, and that's where national contact points in scenarios 1 and 2 have an important role. So in these cases, this first role is the co-creator of the Cluster 5 work programs, with the main goal to contribute to a decent so less, not many flaws, consistent stuff like that. Decent consensus-based work program, which of course is in line with national policies. That means, of course, we all want, at the end of the day, we all want the same, Europe climate neutral, but of course, different countries have different, would like different tastes in the work program with regards to technologies. So everything with regards to offshore wind is something the Netherlands would always support. And on the other hand, something like concentrated solar power is kind of a hobby horse of the Spanish delegation, since it's a technology which is kind of prominent in Spain. So of course, all the delegations, we all try to shape the work program with regards to the technologies a bit in our national priorities. How do we try to do that? By supporting a structure of stakeholders from politics and the field, so the persons conducting R&D, R&I on energy, mobility, climate issues. 2, developing the national position. That's the document which is sent in, normally by one of the delegates, and with this comments on a draft work program, this long table we get from the European Commission, in which we fill with all our comments, which at the end of the day, the delegations made, but normally with input put from their stakeholders. And of course, doing that in collaboration with other delegations and the European Commission. Second kind of additional task, which is the case for not all national contact points, but for a lot of them. It's kind of an advisor for national policies. So national contact points, in this case, support the development of national policies or also funding schemes, normally not writing, but being consulted. Why? Why are we asked? One, because of our expertise on these energy, mobility, climate issues. Normally, we make more time to dive in these things, and often we also have a background in this. So yeah, for technical expertise. Number 2, experience with funding schemes. Of course, we have a lot of day-to-day experience with funding schemes, and that may sound ridiculous for the real newcomers here, like Frankie from Malta, after 2 or 3 months. But we are doing so much with one funding scheme that this experience builds up in an enormous it's so quickly that very soon we have a lot of experience with all these horizon issues, and also with all the aspects of whom to involve, what works with companies, what works with knowledge institutions, and all that. And number 3, of course, we know the sector quite well because we speak to them a lot in our advisory roles and our core task. And that's what is no additional ones. That is what's true for every one of us. What are we in our core task? We are official and non-commercial. We are already paid by the taxpayer advisor for the sector, so all potential applicants to Horizon Europe. I quoted here from the, sometimes there's the question, is there a manual for national contact points? There's no extensive manual, but there's kind of a short one. There are the minimum standards and guiding principles for setting up systems of national contact points. It's published on the funding and tender portal, where we can be found, our names and our contact details. And there's this document of about 15 pages. So our core tasks described in this document: national contact points provide information and on-the-ground advice to potential applicants and beneficiaries, so the sector, through the project lifecycle in their own language. That differs, of course, from country to country. In the Netherlands, I would say maybe half of my meetings and interviews are in English, because a lot of persons at the knowledge institutions, technical universities in the Netherlands, don't speak Dutch. So the national contact points will have a key role in delivering the program's objectives and impacts, ensuring that it becomes known and readily accessible to all potential applicants, irrespective of sector or discipline. So no privileges, being open for everyone who's eligible for Horizon. That is the core task. And this core task, again, can be split up in 3 sub-roles. So one is kind of the signpost or the information spreader. So that's informing the potential applicants about the opportunities, but also the limitations of Horizon Europe by one, of course, circulating information we get from the European Commission, or things we write ourselves by mails and social media, LinkedIn, Twitter. I suppose some of you are using Twitter. I don't, but it is used. Then organizing webinars and real-life information events. And number 3, being accessible and also findable for orientation, for giving all the advice if a project, if an activity would match with Horizon Europe. And then it is not after 1, 2, 3 months of experience, but after some years, or maybe 1, 2 years, it is not only useful, it's very, very important to have a basic knowledge of the alternatives, since in some cases Horizon Europe isn't the best matching funding schemes, but there are other ones, such as CEF, the Innovation Fund, LIFE, Interreg, Eureka, Eurostars, and of course the national schemes. In many cases, no match with Horizon, but better match with another funding program. And then the good advice would be to forward a person, a client, to this better matching program. Number 2, I call it the Oracle. It's clarifying everything which isn't clear in the program, in the scheme, but also in topic texts, on formal aspects and content-wise. So formal aspect can be something that easy, like a knowledge institution is asking, and the funding rate was 70%, wasn't it? No. For knowledge institutions, it's always 100% plus overhead. So these formal things, and also content. What do we have to do? What not? How can we answer these questions? No, nothing should remain open, unclear. But in a lot of cases, it's quite easy. One is knowing or consulting the documents of the European Commission. So all the stuff that's on the funding and tender portal under documents, including the annotated template. So yeah, stuff like funding rate. Is it enough if a consortium has partners from only 2 countries? No, it is not. The clients could have found had found that them by themselves, but in some cases they didn't find it, they didn't read the important documents. Number two, very often we can already answer a question by just carefully reading the topic and looking at words like, to give you an example from a recent topic, on floating PV. There it is on offshore floating PV and inland waters. So question, do we have to do both or only one of it? Then you have to look, is there an and, or is there an and or is there an or? So in these cases, it's easy to answer this question by more carefully reading it. Number three, we do know more than the clients because we get information via the program committee, we get the evaluation summary results, we have NCP trainings from the European Commission, all this thing. So we really know more. And the last thing is we have the option, what the clients don't have. If something still remains unclear, we can forward it to the Cluster 5 Secretariat, this functional mailbox where Elena Dufour and Thomas Schubert are helping to answer these questions. And number three, which is still kind of a core task, but not in all aspects. So that's, I call it the coach, helping, supporting to increase the success chance of applicants by, one, also advising against developing proposals who aren't a match. Better don't submit a weak proposal than make hundreds of hours to write a proposal who won't make it anyway. Nothing bad with advising against submitting if it really doesn't match. Supporting to find partners via our own networks with our colleagues from the Enterprise Europe network, now also with this Greenet platform. Helping to sharpen the project and to tailor it to a topic. So leave out activities that aren't asked. Emphasize and making stronger activities which are in strong demand by the topic. Identifying and highlighting which is new, which is the innovation, and which is the special thing, which is unique of a project. And all in all, making the proposal a clear story to make it the evaluators as easy as possible to be convinced of the project. So that, in my eyes, hasn't to do anything to do with cheap sales talk. It's presenting easily and easily digestible the arguments and making that clear. And in my opinion, you cannot sell a bad project by a good proposal, but you can taint a good project by a bad proposal. Last thing, we aren't the only ones who are doing these things. We are the only ones with this package, with this combination of activities, of roles, but there are other persons. There are grant advisors at universities, at knowledge institutions. There are, of course, the commercial consultants. There are other scientists who are consulted. What are our unique features? Yeah, I could think of 5. Maybe there are more. Of course, we have less conflicts of interests. We don't need the clients for our salary. We are already paid by the taxpayer, so no need to try to sell something, to sell the participation in a program. We can advise against submitting, no problem at all. A commercial consultant wouldn't do in all cases. then more experience with this funding scheme and also proposals, since we really see a lot. Normally, I would say in a year, I read about 10 to 15 proposals. That very quickly adds up to a number almost no commercial consultant would see, since they are normally advising on several funding schemes. Then we have unpublished information. So this thing we get via the program committee, this evaluation reports and also the results. We have short links with the European Commission, so we can call Thomas Schubert or these officers from RTD if we have any questions. Normally someone from the field couldn't do so quickly. And in cases, in scenarios 1 or 2, if we are part of the delegation, a seat in the program committee, so also having direct and very quick information directly from the discussions, the meetings, and from the European Commission. Okay, that's the long answer on the short question. What does a national contact point Horizon Europe do? And then I hand over to Conall. Conall, do you want me to click further, or do you want to take over the presentation?
Thanks, Achim. Yeah, if you stay on the current slide, that would be great, and then I'll maybe ask you to move to the next one in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. So thank you for the invitation to speak today. I myself, I'm a relative newcomer, so I joined as the UK's energy national contact point in May 2022. So I've got some kind of experience of kind of developing my knowledge as a new NCP, and so I was keen to help today and kind of talk through some of my experiences. So Achim has talked about the kind of the key roles of a national contact point and what the day-to-day work actually involves. What I'll be talking about today is the types of clients that we tend to work with. As national contact points, we tend to work across the public sector, private sector, research sector, etc. We work with very, very small businesses as well as large corporations, research institutions, and all of those different types of clients will require a kind of a different type of support. So I'll just talk through today some of the key types of clients that we tend to come across as national contact points. So the first client that we sometimes come across is the experienced coordinator. So in the UK, for example, there are a small number of organisations that have done a lot of coordination work of successful Horizon Europe proposals, and therefore they've got a lot of experience of the programme, and they're strongly connected to partners within, for example, the research partnership, such as the Clean Hydrogen Partnership or the Built for People Partnership. And they also understand the work programs and the kind of the timescales for work programs to be published. These could be large universities, for example, or it could be corporations that are involved in the energy space, or large research institutions as well. And these organisations will generally have staff in-house whose job it is to monitor funding schemes such as Horizon Europe and to prepare proposals. So they have a lot of internal resource, and therefore they don't often require intensive support from the national contact points. But what they may do is ask questions at a strategic level. And what I mean by that is they may be drafting their proposal, and they may require some further information regarding Europe's strategy in certain areas and how European strategy links to this funding topic in question, because obviously that has a big bearing on the content of their proposal. So those discussions will be at a more strategic level as opposed to, discussing the specific content of an application form answer. They generally have a good network across Europe based on projects that they've already been involved in, and therefore they don't have trouble finding partners for projects, and will require limited support in networking. Achim, I don't know if you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. We also have organisations that are experienced partners. So these organisations will have participated in projects but not coordinated. And therefore, they've been involved in the process numerous times of, preparing a consortium, drafting a proposal, etc. They have a solid fundamental understanding of eligibility criteria in terms of what the Commission are looking for, and they understand the importance of scoring highly on all three metrics, which are impact, excellence, and implementation. They'll also have an understanding of less appreciated areas such as open science and the gender dimension as well. So again, their queries may focus on kind of EU strategy, but they also might want to discuss some aspects of their application form, and they might require some help with partner identification to, for example, fill specific holes that they have in a consortium. But generally, again, they'll have established networks that they've developed over a number of years. Achim, if we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I would say that the type of client that takes up the most time as a national contact point are those newcomers with potential. So these will be, businesses, research centres, local authorities or councils, as we say in the UK, or regional authorities, as we might say in parts of Europe, who have perhaps identified a topic in Horizon Europe Cluster 5 and would like some guidance on essentially how they approach that topic. They may have participated in one project or proposal in the past or none, and therefore they require more intensive support in terms of scoping the topic itself, understanding the key requirements of the topic, and mapping how their capabilities can map to those topic requirements as well. So these organizations might require help with finding a topic to start with. So, they may have a need for funding for R&D, but they don't know what's in the work program, and therefore we can provide some initial kind of guidance on what's currently available in the work program. They may need help with finding partners. So if they are new to the program and also don't have extensive connections within the European research ecosystem, then they may require help from their national contact point to to identify partners. So we may signpost them to EEN, we may use the new Greenet partner search website, or we may contact other national contact points to make them aware that we are looking for partners for one of our clients. They may also require help with building links with European sector groups in order to build their knowledge of what's happening at a European level as opposed to at a country level. So for example, they might want to join Hydrogen Europe, they might want to join the Built for People partnership, they might want to join one of the trade associations in Europe in order to build their knowledge of who the key stakeholders are at a European level that are, very much involved in research and development and also active in Horizon Europe. So they might ask us as national contact points to signpost them to some of those associations. And lastly, they may require help with developing a proposal as well. And I know that national contact points in different countries will have different approaches to this. So the UK does provide kind of high level review of proposals and does provide some support with drafting. And I know other countries might provide more intense support, etc. So that does vary, and that's something we'll touch on at the end of this presentation. These clients might have experience with other research and development funding schemes, but not Horizon. Therefore, their experience of applying for funding and participating in a funded project may be different, and therefore they have to kind of learn, you know, a new approach for Horizon Europe, which has quite a specific approach compared to some of the national funding schemes. You know, they may, if they're very much new to research and development, they may require some support on developing an innovation funding strategy as well. So Achim said that, you know, signposting is crucial, and knowledge of, you know, all of the different types of funding for energy innovation is really important. So, you know, being able to help an organization to kind of develop an initial strategy for, you know, which research and development projects they intend to implement, and how those projects align with both national and European funding schemes can be very useful. You know, because we want to make sure that, particularly for very small businesses with limited capacity, that, you know, applying to Horizon is the right thing. You know, it might be in some instances that it's maybe not the most appropriate mechanism. And sometimes these organisations will purely be looking to fill a funding gap. So they may have a research project where they have a specific part of that project that requires funding, and therefore, you know, they're basically looking at anything that they can do to bring in some of that kind of match funding. And sometimes these aren't best suited to the programme, because they can be trying to essentially kind of shoehorn, you know, an idea into a Horizon Europe topic, where sometimes that topic won't be most relevant. And in those instances, you know, we might want to signpost to alternative sources of funding as well. So thanks, Achim. If you're able to move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Lastly, you know, we have challenging clients as well, and you know, as national contact points, we work with everyone. You know, we are an open door, and you know, in some instances, we will get clients who, you know, have no kind of clear understanding of what they're trying to do in terms of research, and also have limited understanding of Horizon, and maybe have applied to other funding schemes in the past at a national level and been unsuccessful, and are therefore very frustrated, and also have, you know, their project might not really be a research project. It may really essentially be about, you know, for example, purchasing bits of kit for their business, essentially. So the example that Achim gave, which was good, was, you know, a school looking to buy solar panels to put on their roof. So, you know, more of an infrastructure project as opposed to a research project. So in cases where we have clients that are doing something that is completely unrelated to, you know, Horizon Europe, you know, it is useful to have a list of other sources of funding that are available, in order to make sure that, you know, that client is able to identify, you know, any alternative sources of funding. And but you know, these clients can also take a lot of time as well, so being able to guide them to, you know, the right place is important as well, to minimize time wasted on their behalf as well. So if we can just move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we've talked today about, you know, the areas that NCPs you know, should be delivering, so support to clients, etc. There are also some areas that we should avoid. So for example, you know, for the national contact points that are active in programme committees, we do have guidance that kind of precludes us from kind of sharing, you know, confidential programme committee documents and figures, in order to, you know, unfairly, you know, treat organizations, and also, you know, we tend to avoid advising our own organization as well, just to avoid any potential, you know, conflict of interest, if our own organization is perhaps, you know, applying for funding. And lastly, you know, forwarding information from communication with clients is obviously something to be avoided as well. You know, often we're speaking to clients about highly confidential subjects. They may be developing a new technology, and the IP is very much protected, and they have they have real concerns about sharing that even with us. So being very careful with that information is also very important. Achim, if you're able to just move to the next slide. So thank you. So we now are moving on to our section on the approaches used in different countries across Europe. So we have 3 examples today. We have the UK, we have the Netherlands, and we have Luxembourg. So just to start, I'll just talk briefly about the approach that we take in the UK to the national contact point role. So the Cluster 5 national contact points in the UK are all based in the UK's National Innovation Agency, which is called Innovate UK. Innovate UK is funded directly by the UK government, but we're not part of the UK government. We're what we call an arm's length body. So we sit outside the UK government, but we're directly funded by them. We advise any organization. We advise public sector, universities, etc. But we work for an organization that's very much focused on business support. So Innovate UK has a mandate from the UK government to support British businesses, and therefore we do tend to have a more of a focus on providing support to businesses, but we will help anyone. We have 3 national contact points for Cluster 5 to cover each of the 3 areas of climate, energy and mobility. And we have a strong focus on supporting organisations across the UK. So, the research sector in the UK is sometimes predominantly focused in kind of the southeast, London and the surrounding areas. So, we have regional national contact points in Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland that we work closely with in order to ensure that we're delivering service across the islands of the UK. We also have a strong focus on widening the group of organisations that apply to Horizon Europe. So in the UK, we have a small number of organisations that are very good at applying to Horizon Europe, very well connected, and have the internal capacity to prepare proposals. But we have been asked by government to widen that group and ensure that the scheme is open to everyone, essentially. So, we try and work with micro businesses, small businesses, in order to guide them through that process and de-risk the process, in order to ensure that that funding is benefiting, as wide a group as possible. I mentioned earlier, we work closely with Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland in order to provide a united approach, and also we have a strong focus currently on online delivery of client support. So our travel policy as an agency is to avoid flying, and also to take a digital first approach. So since the pandemic, we do tend to focus more on kind of using webinars and web calls as opposed to traveling in order to minimize carbon footprint. So that is the UK, and I'll just pass over to Achim now to talk about the Netherlands.
Okay, thank you, Conall. I've got here the full program, the complete service we offer for possible clients. And I'll begin with that, and then I'll say a bit about our organization. So you see that's from the first idea of a project onto submission and the signing of the contract. So what we directly do is the first thing, of course, the signpost role, information, so putting things on LinkedIn, sending mails. There's a new work program, there are possibilities. If there are parties who are interested, we offer them to discuss their first idea, their first 1 or 2 pager. Is it a match? Is it promising? Of course, there are always 2 aspects. One, would a project be eligible? We should have to be capable to provide a clear answer to that. But number 2, also to be capable to make a fair assess of the winning chances, and really to advise against something if it makes almost no chance. What a waste of time to write a proposal which makes almost no chance. Then, of course, help finding partners with our EN colleagues. And then in the full support, we regularly meet with some persons from the consortium and comment on the draft proposal in the make. And maybe 1-2 weeks before submission, we offer a final review, really reading all these 45 pages. Normally it's more, and they still have to shorten and to comment on everything. Also, most of us write into the text and track change modus. One thing we don't do, and I think none of us must do that, is writing own pieces of text. We don't write. We are part of the consortium, but we comment and yeah, we make recommendations to leave out things. If there are questions on legal aspects, administrative aspects, we have a specialist too to answer that. Looks quite extensive, and it is. If we look at a project like that, it can cost easily, let's say, 30-40 hours. So in this project, we would maybe read a draft 2-3 times. 2-3 versions of a draft costs half a day to 1 day, and maybe 4 longer discussions of maybe 1.5 hours. So added up, easily 30-40 hours. How can we do that? We are relatively comfortable in capacity. We are 4 persons for cluster 5. For a country which has a lot less inhabitants than the UK. So we can afford this to do this intense support. And what exists also, that's the down there, also this trainings, basics training, how to prepare impact and stuff like that. Yeah, so very intense, because we are in the comfortable situation to be 4 persons for just 1 cluster. And maybe one last additional thing on our organization. We are, as RWO, we are formally part of the Ministry of Economic Affairs. We aren't identical, but formally we are part of it. So the lines are short, the links are very short. And it's quite easy for us to work together with the persons from the ministries in the delegation, in the program committee, but also with regards to other stuff. That's another quite comfortable thing. And then I hand over to Sanna for the last practice example.
Thank you, Achim and Conall. So I have here one slide on Luxembourg. So LUX Innovation is the National Innovation Agency for Luxembourg. And we are the Luxembourg NCP for Horizon Europe. And just to give you a bit of background, so we are, as you know, we are a very small country of around 600,000 population. And what is unique about Luxembourg also is that around 50% of population is not holding a Luxembourgish passport, so are expat, like myself. And the LUX Innovation, like I said, it's a national innovation agency. So we have a similar remit as Conall was explaining of the UK. We are a public-private partnership, so we are under the Ministry of Economy of Luxembourg, the Ministry of Higher Education and Research, plus FEDIL, which is the Luxembourg Confederation of Industries, Chamber of Commerce and Chamber of Skilled Crafts. But Ministry of Economy is our biggest owner behind us. Coming to the national contact point for Horizon Europe. So first of all, we are only 5 NCPs in LUX Innovation, and that means Horizon Europe in total. So that means that we often cover several sub-programs. So for me, for instance, I cover Cluster 5, so the whole Cluster 5, plus I cover also Cluster 2, and the missions related to Cluster 5 and the partnerships. And besides LUX Innovation, we have the NCP for space, so Cluster 4 space, at the Luxembourg Space Agency. So that's the only exception. We aim to have a personalized and proactive approach as much as possible. And proactiveness means that we really do try to look at the potential. So what, namely, mostly it's companies, but also now more and more we try to look at municipalities, for instance, how we could attract them and inform them of the opportunities of Horizon Europe. And this we do also together with other services in LUX Innovation. We have, for instance, clusters, cluster managers who kind of in their sector are putting together the value chain in Luxembourg and the actors and the companies in Luxembourg. So we do this proactive work and reaching out to potential new clients together with them, and they are kind of the key account managers. But we do it also with, for instance, our startup support and our national funding team. We do monitoring of our work. We have certain KPIs. For instance, we monitor the amount of funding we get in total to Luxembourg. We monitor the funding that goes to private, so the companies. We also, I think one of our KPIs is the success rate. So we aim to have a higher success rate than the EU average in Luxembourg. And we do this monitoring together regularly with the Ministry of Higher Education and Research. And what was mentioned in this webinar, so we have the dual role of, besides being NCPs, we are also program committee delegates, and we participate in different NCP projects. And from our services, I think we pretty much follow the same as what Achim was presenting. So we do trainings. For instance, end of May, we have a proposal writing workshop for beginners. Yesterday, I organized a kind of more awareness raising event on the Build for People partnership, where we specifically try to aim companies and kind of newcomer approach. And we do legal and financial advice, of course. We try to identify experienced partners, recurring names using Cordis, trying to also direct our clients to use Cordis themselves to see who are the usual suspects, to understand good partners. We do proposal review, and what else? I think that is more or less our services, and I think they are in line with what NCPs in other countries do. That's from my side, and I think it's now time for questions. So please to write your questions in the chat if you have some. I think I may start if there's no questions coming from the participants. Thanks a lot, Achim and Conall. It was very, very useful and very well structured and built presentation. I would like to come back to the issue of more, how would I say, tricky or challenging clients. For instance, sometimes you have clients who, despite your advice, will go for Horizon Europe proposal. I am not always sure if I can really stop someone. Sometimes I feel I should, But then I just give strong advice. I say, okay, this is not a good idea. You need to start earlier, or you need to have an experienced coordinator, and so on and so forth. And nonetheless, they go forward. And I find it sometimes difficult, because to tell to an adult person who really, really wants to do something, to stop them. And then I do tend to think that if they're really decided to go, that maybe it's a good experience for them and they will learn, even if it's actually not great for our KPIs, for instance. I don't know what you do, or what's your practice on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the role of a national contact point can be quite tricky, because we have two kind of motives. So the first motive is to support, widening the group of organisations that apply, but but at the same time we also have a motive around increasing the amount of funding that's coming to our country through Horizon Europe. So we understand, having witnessed numerous unsuccessful proposals, and seen how difficult it is to get funding, I think we have quite a good idea of whether a funding will be whether a proposal will be successful, or at least we know the ones that certainly won't be successful. So yeah, it is difficult, but yeah, at the same time, I think it can sometimes be useful for organizations to go through that process of finding partners, preparing a proposal, dealing with all the different bits of the proposal, the part A, part B, etc. But yeah, it is difficult. I suppose all we can do is provide them with the advice, and if they decide to go ahead, then it's up to them, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe to add a bit on that, what I do depends a lot on how far they are. If I'm contacted, that happens 2 weeks before submission with an almost finished but very weak proposal, yeah, then I don't advise against submitting. They have already put so much effort in it, and then they have this proposal which could be useful even if the proposal won't make it. It is useful a bit for maybe further projects or for other activities, and hopefully they will learn from the evaluation summary report. So then I'll still give a bit of comment and advice, and yeah, submit. But if they didn't put a lot of effort in it, then I advise against it. And if they still do, yeah, then they do. We don't give binding advice. We are only advisors. We cannot, yeah, prohibit submitting proposals, even if we expect they won't make it.
Yes, thank you. I agree. I don't see any other questions coming in. I guess then that means we will close the webinar. Thanks again, Conall and Achim. It was very useful, I think, really going to the roles, and this is something we can share together because we know each other's. I mean, we know we share the same things, and it's nice to discuss from this perspective as well. And here, it was useful to hear from you. But I guess we close the webinar, and I would like to wish you all a good day.
And maybe, Sanna, I have
yes.
one last offer for an idea for the person still, we are still present here. If you would like to do something together, that's we could also always do that. So if you have an organization who is in a consortium with a Dutch party, and if you would like to discuss something together, we can always do that. In the past, I did once, I advised on a proposal with a Dutch and Austrian organization in the consortium together with my colleague Siegfried Leucht. And yeah, I'd like to do it together, also to see his way of advising and doing that. And in one case, I did a discussion together with Stephen from APRE. He does something else by now. But yeah, I think that would also be useful to get to know about each other practices. if there are mixed consortia where combined advice would work.
That sounds like a great idea. I'd be happy to take up on that. I think it makes sense. And by the way, we in Luxembourg, we propose proposal review, even if we are not the coordinator, or Luxembourgish organization is not the coordinator. And I think, yeah, it makes sense. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I would agree with that, definitely.
Anything else you'd like to add, or we close it? Thanks a lot, and see you next time, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening.